Well, good Sunday morning to you folks. It is Sunday, September the 13th, 2020, and I am so glad that you've decided to tune in and join me for Bible study as we continue to take a look at the extraordinary book of Proverbs. You know, the more I read Proverbs, the more I meditate on Proverbs, the more I study Proverbs, the more I share Proverbs, the more I fall in love with this book. It is just one of the most practical, and it is one of the most relevant books that you'll find anywhere. And so our time has been very well spent. I have enjoyed it. I hope you've got something out of it. We're about a third of the way through. Today, if you've got your Old Testaments, and I hope that you do, you'll want to open them to Proverbs chapter 11. That's what we're going to take a look at today, Proverbs chapter 11. While you're turning to Proverbs chapter 11, I'm also excited about something else. You know, after today, there are 2 Sundays left in the month of September. And that means that in 3 weeks, 3 weeks from today, this will no longer be pre-recorded. 3 weeks from today, this will be live streamed. Of course, you don't have to watch it via live stream. You can be here in person. I'm so glad that we're able to get back to some Bible classes beginning in October on Sunday. And I am excited to continue this study on Sunday. We'll be doing a different study here at the building on Wednesdays. But I will be continuing Proverbs through October and November here at the building in front of real, live, walking, talking, breathing people. And I'm really excited about that. Of course, we know that a lot of you still aren't able to get out. You're still not comfortable with getting out and being at an in-person Bible class. And we want you to know that is completely okay. You'll be able to tune in, as I said, live. You'll be able to watch it during the Bible class. Or you can tune in anytime via our YouTube channel. Okay. With that in mind, Proverbs chapter 11, hopefully your Bibles are open to Proverbs chapter 11 as we take a look at this chapter. We are basically going to be looking at this morning the contrast between righteousness and wicked. Essentially, the entire chapter is going to be the difference between righteous living and unrighteous living. With that in mind, let's take a look at it. Verse 1 of chapter 11 begins this way. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is His delight. Now, I think most of us understand what he's talking about when he says a false balance and a just weight. This had to do with business practices. And as long as there's been people doing business, things have been sold according to weight or volume. And so when someone comes and they want a pound of bananas, it would be put on a scale, and the weight of those bananas, if it were, this cluster of bananas would weigh 2 pounds, then you would pay, it was priced per pound, you would pay, 2 pounds. If it's 50 cents a pound, 2 pounds, you'd be paying $1. If you were paying for a gallon of gas, you trust that the measure that they are calling a gallon is truly a gallon. I'm sure most of you notice this, but when you drive up to a gas pump, in fact, you'll see a little sticker there. And that little sticker there is a compliance sticker that basically says, this has been checked out. And when it says you're getting a gallon of gas, you're actually getting a gallon of gas. Well, back in the day, and it would even happen today more often if there weren't rigorous checks and balances to ensure that business practices were on the up and up and could be trusted. But back in the day, there would be people who would be unprincipled in their business practices. And again, it's not that there aren't unprincipled people anymore, but there are built-in checks and balances in cultures and communities like ours to try to dissuade unprincipled people and to make sure that businesses are are treating people fairly. But oftentimes, people would, unprincipled business people, they would have a scale, and that scale would, they would set it to where it would reflect to the customer that they're getting a pound, but in reality, they may be getting 3/4 of a pound. And of course, I don't have to tell you what the purpose of all of that was. They could charge people for a pound, but they were only having to give, a half a pound of food. Or they could charge people for a certain volume of liquid, but in reality, they would be giving the people a smaller amount. And so it would be to that unprincipled businessman's advantage when he could cheat customers and the customer not know it. Well, this is all about then business practices. You understand that. And what he is saying, and by the way, this expression here, abomination to the Lord, you're going to find that expression used 12 times in the book of Proverbs. And that expression was the sharpest rebuke that you could possibly get. And so, this is telling us that when it comes to business practices, God is serious. He is serious about people treating their customers fairly. That all people be treated with integrity and fairly and honestly. Corrupt business practices are one of those things that God absolutely despises, because the fabric of society is built on integrity, and a community will just fall apart with unfair practices and corruption running rampant. We all know, when we all hear about cultures and community that are so steeped in corruption, that the whole culture just lays in poverty. They can never rise up because corruption is so rampant. And so a false balance, this is one of the things that God despises most. Money that is wrongfully gained, in other words, is not going to do a person any good in the day of judgment. Listen, they may be able to prosper in the here and now, but in the end, they're going to have to face God about their business practices. And they don't want to face the infinitely holy, morally perfect God and have to answer for a lifetime of lies and deceit and corrupt business practices. Okay, let's look at verses 2 and 3 now. This is about humility. This is about integrity. And it is essentially saying that when it comes to the basic guides in life, those two things should be our North Star. Humility and integrity. Let's take a look at it. When pride comes, then comes dishonor. But with the humble is wisdom. The integrity of the upright will guide them, but the crookedness of the treacherous will destroy them. So, pride or arrogance and deceit. Those things, and there is an implied link here, by the way, between arrogance and fraud. See, arrogance comes first. When pride comes, then comes dishonor. And then it's linked to integrity. So the implication there is arrogant people are far more likely to engage in deceit, whereas humble people are more likely to be people of integrity. Someone who thinks highly of themselves, they're full of pride and arrogance, they can easily resort to cheating in business affairs, because if they think so highly of themselves, they want to impress people, they want to give an impression like they are the most successful, the most important, they never make a mistake. And so they're going to be very ripe for deceit. To protect that image that is portrayed in that arrogant spirit, they're more likely to cheat in business affairs. So the best guides in life, you want to succeed in life, in all arenas in life, ultimately two things: humility and integrity. Look at verse 4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. This is something to remember. Listen, you can gain wealth in all kinds of unprincipled ways in our world. We know that is a fact. I was reading on the internet a couple of days ago, maybe it was yesterday, how someone, a former athlete, was arrested in a scandal, a multi-million-dollar scam. Scams are all around us, and you can get a lot of money. People can be scammed all the time. We see links being sent to people, preying upon naive people. Click this link. They're trying to, in unprincipled ways, separate you from your money. People who will call and represent a charity. And again, there's some people that are so kind-hearted and they're so naive, and they would never think that someone could be so unprincipled and dishonest that they can be lying about some good work. But the world is full of people like this. And the fact of the matter is, they may gain a whole lot of money, people who are involved in these dishonest scams or who are unprincipled in business. But one day they will stand before the Lord, and it says, and they will not profit in the day of wrath. All the money in the world is not going to change what's going to happen to you when you stand before God, who is infinitely just, infinitely holy, and infinitely perfect. What will deliver you is righteousness. A person whose character of life is in harmony with God. Look at verse 5 and 6. These proverbs parallel each other, and they describe the respective fates of the righteous and the wicked. The righteousness of the blameless will smooth his way, but the wickedness will fall by his own wickedness. The righteousness of the upright will deliver them, but the treacherous will be caught in their own greed. Notice the second half of both of those verses, verse 5 and 6. The wicked will fall by his own wickedness. Verse 6, but the treacherous will be caught by their own greed. The responsibility lies with you. If you fall because of wickedness, it is because of the choices that you make. You chose to be that way. You chose to go down that road. That's the course that you chose to plot. And be assured that if you go down that road by your own choices, you will ultimately be destroyed. Look at verse 7. When a wicked man dies, his expectation will perish, and the hope of strong men perishes. The righteous is delivered from trouble, but the wicked takes his place. Now, what this is all about is, again, it's emphasizing not only the destruction of the wicked, but he's emphasizing the utter destruction of the wicked. God is utterly going to destroy the wicked, but He's going to give life to the righteous. When a wicked man dies, his expectation will perish. The righteous will be delivered from trouble. The wicked will take his place. God will utterly destroy wickedness. Look at verses 9 through 13 now. These proverbs deal with how a person's life influences the larger community. This is so important. With his mouth, the godless man destroys his neighbor. But through knowledge, the righteous will be delivered. When it goes well, or let's just skip down to verse 12. Hold on to verse 10 and 11. Let's go from 9 to verse 12. He who despises his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding keeps silent. Those two proverbs, verses 9 through 12, obviously are about a relationship to one's neighbor. And it is saying that we have within us the potential to bless our neighbors or mess up our neighbors. How we behave can influence, our surroundings. And in this one, particularly verse 9, by his mouth, the godless man destroys his neighbor. Wagging tongues is the idea here. You'll see the same thing when it comes to a relationship to the city here in verses 10 and 11. Take a look at it. When it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. And when the wicked perish, there is joyful shouting. Again, in context here, you've got the wicked person is the person who is sowing dissension with their tongues. They're sowing destructive influences. Listen, I don't have to tell you, we see this play out in front of our eyes. We see it in the news media. We've seen it in the last few months. Rioting in cities. Lies being spread to foment rebellion, to foment anger. Lies, distortions. Evil people are coming into communities, and they are with their words, they are fanning the flames of rebellion. Well, maybe it's justified, someone says. No, there is no justification for for the violence you're seeing. There is no justification for those kinds of things. But we have the right to protest. Yeah, we have the constitutional right to peacefully protest. Absolutely. Those things are not peaceful protests. It is a veneer of protest. It is intended for one thing, to destroy communities. And this is what we're seeing here. And so most people, and when the wicked perish, there is joyful shouting. That's right. Righteous people don't cheer on that group, those kinds of people. Righteous people want these kinds of people removed and done away with. They're not a blessing to a community. They're a curse to a community. They don't advance good causes. They just create awful situations. They degrade neighborhoods and communities. They don't bless neighborhoods and communities. And yet you'll see it presented as that way. That is a lie. This is the truth. A person's life will influence the larger community either for good or either for bad. Verse 11, by the blessing of the upright, a city is exalted. But by the mouth of the wicked, it's torn down. Wow, does that sound familiar? By the mouth of the wicked, cities are torn down. But it's by the blessing of the upright, honest people, people of integrity, people who are, they embrace truth. They are concerned with true justice, not distorted and perverted versions of justice. Good people, honorable people. That's why you want to live in communities that are full of people like that, because you want your community to thrive. You want it to be safe. You want it to be a place where you can raise your family. You don't want to live in these communities that are burning down around you. You don't want to take your kids in there. Nobody does. And verse 11 says it all. The blessing of the upright, a city is exalted. You want to live in a place like that. You don't want to live in a place where liars are running rampant and unprincipled, power-hungry people are running rampant. By the mouth of the wicked, a city is torn down. Wow, powerful stuff, relevant stuff. Verse 12, he who despises his neighbor lacks sense. We already looked at that, but a man of understanding keeps silent. How we can relate to our neighbor, how we can build up relationships or tear down relationships, and it goes back to the mouth. Look at verse 13. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy conceals a matter. Again, we're talking about righteous people. We're talking about people of integrity. They don't only do not lie, they do not slander, but they know how to keep things private. Righteous people, they don't lie, they don't slander people, and they know how to keep things private. Let's look at verse 14. Verse 14 and 15. It's emphasizing again, imprudent action brings about disaster. And vice versa. Prudent action brings about good things. Look at verse 14 and 15. Where there is no guidance, the people fall. Yeah, that's right. Where there is no leadership, disaster looms. But in abundance of counselors, there is victory. Seek advice, good guidance, good governance. There are good things where there is good governance. Where there is virtually no good governance, where people basically step out of the way and there is no guidance, and the people fall. They fail. Look at verse 15. He who is a guarantor for a stranger will surely suffer for it, but he who hates being a guarantor is secure. Don't let friends and acquaintances, in other words, drag you into foolish business ventures. We've talked about that before. Some people have done that, and it has been a terrible thing. You know, I had a preacher friend who told me, a dear friend, that one time, he was trying to be a loving person, and when he was real young in his ministry, and he co-signed a car note for one of the members of the church. Yep. Seriously. He did. He will tell you now that it was crazy. And as you can imagine, everything went south. And he ended up paying for a car that he never possessed. Yeah. Well, that's what the book of Proverbs says. We've seen it other places. We'll see it here. Who is a guarantor for a stranger? You say, well, that's strangers. That's not friends. No. That's anybody. This is warning against is, again, people dragging you into foolish business ventures, and it is foolish to guarantee a note for someone, to take on a liability that you have no control over. Okay, let's look at verse 16. Let's look at verse 16 and 17. But this is about kindness and cruelty. A gracious woman attains honor, and ruthless men attain riches. The merciful man does himself good, but the cruel man does himself harm. Okay, look at this again. A gracious woman attains honor. This is about your approach to life. And this is not just women. This principle is for men and women. If you are a gracious, kind person, you will be respected, you will be honored. A ruthless man attains riches. The idea here is, if you have a hard-nosed approach to life, you may gain wealth, but that's about the only thing that you will gain. That kind of approach to life is ultimately destructive. You can have money, but you won't have honor, and you won't have respect. But the merciful man does himself good. Again, that's that principle there. Kindness, mercy, it will benefit a person in their relationships. This is the person, the merciful man places relationships over career and achievements. The cruel man or woman places achievements and career over relationships. And so the end of verse 17 says, but the cruel man does himself harm, or woman. Look at verse 18 and 19. The wicked earns deceptive wages, but he who sows righteousness gets a true reward. This is the wages of sin and unrighteousness. The wicked earns a deceptive wage. The idea here is this. You may get rich in your wickedness. But don't be deceived. There is coming a time when that's all going to go away. They are fleeting and they are illusory. It's an illusion that it's going to last forever. And if you get your money that way, and think that it's going to bring you lasting peace, it's not. I don't know how long you're going to enjoy that, but there's coming a time when you're going to stand before God, and it's going to be a very different matter. But he who sows righteousness gets a true reward. The wages of the righteousness of righteous people is permanent. Even when you die, because you are righteous, you used your money, you got it honestly, you used it with integrity, and with humility and with generosity, you will continue to receive the blessings of that in eternity. Verse 19, he who is steadfast in righteousness will attain to life. That implies eternal life. And he who pursues evil will bring about his own death. That's exactly what we've been talking about. Look at verse 20 and 21. Divine judgment. The perverse in heart are an abomination to the Lord. Hey, there's that expression again, abomination to the Lord. It's one of the 12 times you'll see it in the book of Proverbs. A perverse in heart, but the blameless in their walk are his delight. Again, emphasizing righteousness and wicked. Both will stand before God. Those who choose the course of wickedness will ultimately pay. Look at verse 21. Assuredly the evil man will not go unpunished, but the descendants of the righteous will be delivered. God's judgment, in other words, follows his evaluation of people. Look at verse 22. As a ring of gold in a swine's snout, so is the beautiful woman who lacks discretion. The picture here, a beautiful ring in a pig's nose, is a case of beauty in an inappropriate place. And that's what the second part of this is all about. A woman who has abandoned discretion, that is, she's involved in an immoral way of life. That is, beauty is in an inappropriate place, and it is going to be to her own destruction. An immoral life is an inappropriate place to be. It's a destructive place to be. It is like a ring in the nose of a pig. Look at verse 23 through 27 now. This is about generosity and selfishness. Again, we've talked a little bit about this, but we will finish looking at it here through verse 27. The desire of the righteous is only good, but the expectation of the wicked is wrath. There is one who scatters and yet increases all the more, and there is one who withholds what is justly due, and yet it results only in want. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit more here, this whole idea of generosity and selfishness here. The one who scatters and yet increases more, the one who withholds what is justly due. It's kind of axiomatic that greedy and selfish people, epitomized in Western literature, as Mr. Scrooge. Whenever we think about greedy and selfish people, that's kind of the images that's been portrayed in Western literature. And as they're portrayed that way, they're designed to generate within people hatred toward them. They're generally hated by people. And that's how it's supposed to be. They're not liked. And then generous people are presented in such a way to where, in literature, where you love them and respect them. And that's supported by Scripture. That is supported by Scripture. There's one who scatters, that's the generous person, and yet increases all the more. He's blessed by that. And then there's one who withholds what is justly due, Scrooge. We all know the Scrooge story, and yet it results only in want. He was left so lacking that they're going to ultimately lose everything that they're trying so desperately to hold on to. The generous man, verse 25, will be prosperous. They're going to have greater and greater prosperity, but he who waters will himself be watered. You're going about the picture here of watering. You're not just interested in your own plant, you're interested in other plants, and you're going around watering and benefiting and blessing other people. And it's going to come back to you. Now, this isn't necessarily your cup run over theology, that the more you invest in others, the wealthier you're going to get. Now, that might happen, but it might not. But return in wealth, money, is not the only way that one is blessed and benefited. And we've seen that throughout this chapter. There is honor. There is respect. There is admiration. And all of those things. There's love. And so generous people are going to experience greater and greater prosperity. Verse 26, he who withholds grain, the people will curse him. There's Scrooge again. He's got it. He's hoarding it. People need it. But he's going to keep that all to himself. He's not interested in the needs of anyone else. He's just interested in his own needs. Forget it. He's not going to be honored. He's not going to be loved. He's not going to be appreciated. But blessings will be on the head of him who sells it. That again is the generous person. He who diligently seeks good seeks favor, but he who seeks evil, evil will come to him. And so all these verses 23 through verse 27, exhorts us, hey, listen, don't hold on to things with a closed fist. Don't be like that. Hold on to things with an open hand. Be generous, and it will be a blessing to you. You will never regret being generous. Real quickly, verses 28 through 31, then that brings us to an end. This is a close parallel to some things we're going to see over in chapter 12. He who trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf. He who trusts in his riches will fall. If you are counting on your wealth for everything, then you are going to be, and the implication here, by the way, is wickedness. The one who trusts in his wicked, or trusts in his riches, is the wicked person. They are going to fall again. What they have is an illusion. It's temporary. It's fleeting. The righteous are going to flourish like a green leaf. Verse 29. He who troubles his own house will inherit wind, and the foolish will be servant to the wise-hearted. The fruit of the righteous is the tree of life. Who is wise wins souls. If the righteous will be rewarded in the earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner? Okay, look at verse 29 again. He who troubles his own will inherit the wind. The foolish will be a servant to the wise-hearted. He who troubles his own house. The idea here, and we're going to see it in verses 3 and 4. Look at verse 4 of chapter 12. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who shames him is like rottenness in the bones. It teaches, just like verse 29 here, that a person can't provide for the security of his family through any means that violates the basic principles of right and wrong. He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind. If you are not practicing righteousness, living the right way, you can't bless your family. You cannot do it. And so if we are going to bless our family, we can't be focused on making as much money as possible. We should give thought to our spouses. We should give thought to the needs of our children, the spiritual nurture of them, the emotional nurture of them, and we should conduct our lives with integrity, the same way that we would expect everyone in the family to conduct themselves. And that's how we're going to bless our family. Verses 30 here and 31, really the thought's going to continue through the first two verses of chapter 12. But the whole idea here is that a violent, undisciplined life is going to be destructive, whereas a virtuous life that's carried out in submission to God's ways will be a blessing. Look at it again, verse 30 and 31. The fruit of righteousness is the tree of life. That is the virtuous life. It's going to be, you're submitting to God's way. He who is wise wins souls. I think the New Revised Standard says violence takes lives away. The person who lives in submissions to God's way, God's going to intervene. There's divine intervention here. If the righteous will be rewarded in the earth, how much more the wicked and the sinner? God is saying here in verse 31 that there's also benefits. Not only do we think in terms of eternity, everything we do is in view of eternity, but we also realize that whether we choose to live righteous or wicked on the earth has implications for things now as well. There will be divine intervention. God is not just waiting for eternity to intervene. He will even intervene here. The righteous will be rewarded in the earth. How much more the wicked and the sinner? God's going to deal with both even here. Okay, so goes chapter 11. Thank you again for tuning in. I really appreciate the fact that you are interested in opening the Word of God and opening your heart to it. I hope it is blessing you. It's really making me think about all areas of life. And we're going to continue this next week, chapter 12. Until then, take care and God bless.